Top of the morning! 'Tis me, your delightful host Sharon, traveling back in time to Sunday, June 30th, 2019, the day before I leave to visit the Emerald Isle. So I am practicing me Irish. They won't beat my ass in Ireland for talking like that, or will they? Irish listeners, please confirm. This show normally streams live for patrons of habeas humor who would be glued to their screens as I speak, waiting for me to fuck something up. This episode is a little different, and check the show notes if you want all the details about why. Before we move on, I want to say thank you times a million to everyone that has been watching on YouTube and subscribing to the Habeas Humor channel. See that subscribe button down below? Please hit that now if you have not. Remember, the show still is available in audio podcast format, so no need to miss out if you are driving, watching porn, or otherwise do not have enough eyesight bandwidth for me. No fat jokes. I apologize for any ableism that is implied in that last bit, as I realize some members of the audience may be blind or otherwise visually impaired. I don't know how much you use YouTube, but could you subscribe anyway? I would totes appreciate it. Thanks. And now time for some legal news.
Giving our views on the legal news.
Sarah Hucka-byebye Sanders has left her job as White House press secretary. In truth, she left her job months ago when the White House curiously stopped doing press briefings. But now we can stop paying her. Donald Trump helped to announce the news on June 13th with this tweet. After 3.5 years, our wonderful Sarah Hucka-byebye Sanders will be leaving the White House at the end of the month and going home to the great state of Arkansas. Well, first of all, what does he mean by, the wonderful Sarah? Our wonderful Sarah. Is he saying goodbye to a high-level White House official or, the Good Witch of the North? It's something I'm curious about there, first of all, by the way he phrases that. Secondly, what 3.5 years are we talking about? The election was November 2016, and Trump moved into the White House in 2017, so the longest amount of time the wonderful Sarah could have been there is 2.5 years. Donald, were you trying to do arithmetic? Leave that to the mathematicians. In fact, let them handle anything to do with real numbers. You're flying too close to the sun. No one looks for objective data from you, Donald, not even your own base. Whenever you feel the need to name a discrete number, let it go and just describe a vague idea of the number instead, the way you normally do,
Let's run through the numbers.
A negative number.
The lowest number ever.
A catastrophically low number.
A very, very small number.
A small number.
Actually, the number is getting up.
That number is rising. A large number.
It's a big number. Big number.
A very big number.
Bigger number than that.
Big league number.
A huge number.
A very significant number.
A very, very high number. Some fairly vast number.
A staggering number. A record number.
The number is through the roof.
The numbers are astronomical.
Ever-growing numbers.
Numbers that you've never seen before. Numbers that nobody has ever seen. Numbers that you wouldn't even think are believable.
Unbelievable numbers.
A massive number. The biggest number ever. It's a ridiculous number.
And when you add it all together, a lot of good things are going to happen.
Thank you.
Now, to be charitable, I will acknowledge that Trump did hire Sanders in February of 2016, but that was at least a full year before she actually got into the White House. Remember, it took some needling to get the Trumps to actually move there. They thought the place was a total dump, and they wanted to stay in New York. And Donald Trump was asking his attorneys to write legal memoranda, arguing that the Constitution allows him to just officially name a Mar-a-Lago golf cart the Oval Office, and that's that. So I don't think we know the exact date Donald Trump moved in. We would have to check the White House petty cash journal to see when the cleaning staff started buying, deep cleaning solvents to get the stench of incompetence out of the carpets. But there is no way under any calculations that Sarah Huckabee Sanders was with the White House in the job of press secretary for 3.5 years. So for Trump to say that she was leaving after 3.5 years is flatly wrong. And were we existing in an alternate universe where truth mattered, such carelessness with details might concern people. In our actual universe, the President of the U.S. does not let the facts get in the way of a good tweet. And about 1/3 to 1/2 of the people in this country believe that facts are a Chinese hoax. Trump also tweeted that he hopes Sarah Huckabee Sanders will run for governor of Arkansas. Oh man, I have such different hopes for what she does with herself. But what a waste it would be for such a natural politician to not run. Wouldn't you say she just lights up a room with her blinding charisma, that Sarah Huckabee Sanders?
The House is likely to consider the bill week of November 13th. In order to stay on pace, we want to see a House bill passed by Thanksgiving. This is a very aggressive timeline, but one that will help us get tax cuts this year so families and businesses can plan for 2018.
Vote for me or I will hunt you down and stuff you like my brother's dog. Seriously, if Sanders wins the governorship, it will be not for her famous people skills or her trademark straightforward honesty, but because of what really matters, connections. She's the offspring of a previous governor, and Americans love that shit. Yay, they have the same name, automatic vote. We do not know precisely why Sanders left the White House. Perhaps she is tired of being a lying mouthpiece for Trump and the butt of endless criticism and mockery, or she is leaving to advance her own political career or to help Trump campaign for 2020, in which case, let us rejoice, the mockery continues. Sanders could not campaign for herself or for Trump while also being the White House press secretary, as there is a federal law called the Hatch Act that prohibits federal employees from being political while working. The law was created in 1939, and the official title of it is an act to prevent pernicious political activities. The act is named for its sponsor, Senator Carl Hatch, who, as far as I can tell, is of no relation to Orrin Hatch. Carl Hatch was a Democratic senator from New Mexico in the 1930s. According to Wikipedia, there was some corrupt shit going on in the FDR administration during the New Deal. Remember those alphabet soup agencies you learned about in school? The SSB, the SEC, the FHA, and so on. Those created a ton of federal employees like we had never seen in America. There was an alphabet soup agency called the Works Progress Administration, or WPA. It employed people, mostly unskilled men, to carry out public works projects. During the late 1930s, some of those public works projects apparently involved campaigning and sometimes apparently even bribing voters in order to support certain candidates in the Democratic Party. i.e. the party that controlled the White House and the executive branch. An extension of the White House, a huge extension in that age and later after that. In 1938, these scandals got exposed in the press. The public learned, for example, that there were some Democratic politicians who directed the hiring practices of the WPA, even deciding behind the scenes who would serve as managers in the agency and so forth. The chief administrator of the WPA and the head of the snake was Harry Hopkins, who was tight with President Roosevelt. So FDR supposedly resisted the Hatch Act, but it had a significant amount of bipartisan support in Congress because not all of the Democrats were that dirty. Ultimately, FDR caved to political pressure and signed the Hatch Act into law the very last day it was on his desk. You can find the Hatch Act in Title V of the United States Code starting at Section 7323. This section says, in relevant part, an employee may not use their official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering with or affecting the result of an election, and they may not knowingly solicit, accept, or receive political contributions. FYI, the Act defines employee as essentially any person employed in the executive branch other than the president and the vice president, and a few other exceptions written into the law that don't really matter for our purposes. So no campaigning or stumping if it is in your official capacity, which is going to be always if you are someone known for being a major official in the government. You don't get to just say, yeah, I am the White House press secretary, but I am appearing here on Fox News as a private citizen who just happens to think Donald Trump is the second coming of Jesus. I mean, you can try that, and Trump's people do try, but that is a highly unreasonable way to try to get around the law. So again, Section 7323 of the Hatch Act says most federal employees cannot interfere with elections and cannot solicit, accept, or receive political contributions. Then there is Section 7324, and that says in relevant part that no political activity whatsoever by federal employees while on duty or in any official federal government building or while wearing their government uniforms or government flair or while in any official federal government car. No political activity. So if you are a federal employee trying to leak some dirt or something about the administration, and let's say your code name is Loose Sphincter or whatever, and you go to a parking garage at 3 in the morning to meet with a reporter, at least wear your civvies and drive your own car. You still will be breaking laws, but not this one. The second part of this section contains several exceptions to the prohibition on political activity while on duty. This section contains exceptions for certain federal employees who are allowed to do political activity so long as they are not using government money or resources in any way. The people who fall under this exception have to be working in the executive office of the president, which means they are in the physical White House or the executive office building next door to the White House. Also, they have to be either paid from congressional appropriations or they have to be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate and working inside the U.S., and determining nationwide or foreign policy. So this exception does not cover Jared Kushner or Ivanka Trump because their asses were never confirmed by the Senate. You probably are wondering what happens to people who violate the Hatch Act. You can find the penalties in Section 7326. So as you can see here, it's really not terribly severe. There is a menu of punishments, and any item or combination of items can be chosen from the menu. For example, there could be a fine of up to $1,000, or the offending employee could be fired, demoted, suspended, barred from federal employment for up to 5 years, or just reprimanded. So the worst possible punishment for violating the Hatch Act is being fired from your job and barred from working for the federal government for 5 years and having to pay a $1,000 fine. On the other side of the scale, you could get off with a reprimand. The Hatch Act does not specifically say who is supposed to decide guilt or innocence and impose punishment when a federal employee gets accused of violating the Hatch Act. Congress has given that authority to the Office of the Special Counsel, although their jurisdiction is limited. In general, anyone can go online to the link in the show notes and file a complaint of possible prohibited political activity with the Office of Special Counsel if you believe you know of a violation. That does not apply, however, if you work for certain intelligence agencies like the CIA, the NSA, or the Armed Forces, or the FBI, and there are a handful of other exceptions to the jurisdiction of the Office of Special Counsel. All that information is available online. When the OSC gets a complaint, they investigate it, and provided that no one, obstructs the investigation or otherwise taints the findings. I don't know who would possibly try to do that, but I suppose anything is possible in this wacky world. So, assuming no funny business, the OSC should be able to determine if there is evidence of a violation of the Hatch Act and if such violation is serious enough to prosecute. The official website says when violations are not sufficiently egregious to warrant prosecution, the OSC may issue a warning letter to the employee involved. The definition of an insufficiently egregious violation would be up to the discretion of the agency. I would think that it would be something like if one day you wear a Warren 2020 shirt to your job at the IRS, you could, get a warning letter. But in the case of a serious violation, the matter is going to go to an administrative hearing, and the accused person will have a chance to defend themselves because that is a constitutional right called procedural due process. If the employee loses at the hearing, they are supposed to have a penalty imposed. However, that requires whatever agency the person works for to carry out the penalty, and we'll get back with more on that in a bit. The Trump administration does not have a stellar record of complying with the Hatch Act. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, in fact, has abided by the rule better than many others in the Trump crew. She did have a couple of snafus. In about August of 2018, she tweeted the words "great again," which is an invocation of Trump's campaign slogan, so that's not allowed. Then near the end of 2018, she tweeted a photo of herself in the Oval Office with Kanye West, who was wearing a MAGA hat. Here's that photo for the people watching on YouTube. I heard that Sanders and Kanye also ate some Chick-fil-A together, and then they looked up their family trees to see how many of his ancestors used to be owned by her ancestors, and it was a super fun day. But that political photo tweet by Sanders caused the matter to be brought to the attention of the Office of Special Counsel. According to Newsweek, the OSC determined that Sanders had not committed any serious violations. So there were no hearings about these incidents. I would hope they at least sent her a warning letter. It is my strong suspicion that Sanders quit her job at the White House because of the Hatch Act. If she wants to go a-campaigning, and I believe she does, she cannot do that while still being employed in the executive branch. On Sanders' last day at the White House, they gave her a goodbye party, and Sanders herself tweeted this photo. So here we have a room full of people smiling and applauding, and we see from the rear a person we presume is Donald Trump, though it could just be an orange jumbo magic marker in a jacket that's too tight through the shoulders. Sanders is standing in the middle of the room with her arms crossed and an expression on her face that says, "You know damn well what you did to make me upset, and so help me God, if you ask me if I have my period, I will slap the skin off of your face." And then behind her is what I can only guess is her goodbye gift, and that appears to be a fishbowl-sized container of red cherry Mike-and-Ike candy. I knew Trump was cheap, but damn. Oh, sorry, I'm told that the actual gift was a free pardon if Sanders could guess the number of candies in the jar. She got it right, and there was actually a post-it that we obtained written by Trump himself with the number of candy that says a massive number, the biggest number ever. That definitely is a Trump description of a number. So there went the member of Trump's staff that has perhaps been the most compliant with the Hatch Act. In fact, during congressional hearings on White House ethics, Sanders actually was mentioned by Representative Ocasio-Cortez as an example of someone in the Trump administration who knows the Hatch Act and mostly follows it, thereby demonstrating that such understanding is possible. You see, these days, before you can try to nail a Trump official for breaking the law, you have to first establish that the person was not in fact so dumb that they didn't know there was a law against whatever thing they did. Oh, what? That was illegal? Sorry, I must have misunderstood the rules. Let's take a look at Congress.
Beyond that, you said in your opening statement, correct, that even Sarah Huckabee Sanders acknowledges in her work, she acknowledges the bars in the Hatch Act, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we have many members of the president's own administration who honor the law and respect the law.
Whoa, sounds like someone in the White House broke the law again? Who could it be? Was it Ivanka, who once tweeted a photo of a Trump campaign sign and typed, quote, "4 years ago today, I introduced my father at Real Donald Trump when he launched a campaign that would forever change America. Because of his courage, Americans are safer and more prosperous, and the best is yet to come," end quote. That one's a hat trick because the tweet does violate the Hatch Act. Plus, the very fact that Ivanka Trump is working in the White House is a violation of the federal law against nepotism. Plus, nearly every statement in that tweet is a filthy lie. So, once again, were we in an alternate universe where rules apply to the Trumps, those could be issues, but we're not. So maybe the House committee was talking about someone else. Was it Jared, who is currently under investigation by the Office of Special Counsel for allegedly engaging in prohibited campaign fundraising for Donald Trump? Once again, the law against nepotism prohibits Jared Kushner from legally holding his White House position, but once you marry into the Trumps, you get to have your cake and eat it too, apparently. Besides, we all know that Donald Trump only put Jared to work in the White House in order to cock block him, because if Jared is working, he can't be fucking Ivanka. And if Donald doesn't get to fuck Ivanka, then no one gets to fuck Ivanka. That's why Donald gave Jared that never-ending list of things to do. He had to make peace in the Middle East, and then solve global warming, and fix health care, and reform criminal justice, whatever. Terrific, just stay at work real late, Jared, real late. It actually was not Jared Kushner that the House of Representatives was discussing during the hearings we saw in the clip. Ooh, could it have been Stephanie Grisham, former spokesperson for Melania Trump, new White House press secretary, and professional bitchy sorority girl? Let's talk about Stephanie Grisham. Here she is in North Korea having a shoving match with security for Kim Jong-un.
US is good. Hey, he's good. US cool.
Donald Trump stopped on by North Korea after doing the G20 summit in Japan because there is no despot he won't pal around with. Wait, you kill kids in camps? No way! Me too! They took some photo ops. Here they are, Trump and Trump and Kim Jong-un. Trump thinks he is making a huge advance by being the first U.S. president to visit North Korea. Kim Jong-un is pointing at him all like, look at this moron. He's giving me legitimacy and helping me wield leverage over my enemies. What a tool. So, new press secretary Stephanie Grisham was there as well, apparently jumping in with both feet on her first day on the job. Her future press briefings, should the White House ever start doing those again, will be interesting. She does not hold back. Here she is giving the press a piece of her mind on behalf of Melania Trump.
First Lady Melania Trump's spokesperson is hopping mad, and she is not mincing words about what she calls unfair coverage of Mrs. Trump. It is extremely rare for a First Lady spokesperson to take such a visible position, but she was apparently spurred to do so by a critical online story.
Team Melania is fighting back.
We're defending ourselves.
In her first TV interview, the First Lady spokeswoman, Stephanie Grisham, appeared on Fox and Friends and lashed out at critics.
The consistent negative coverage that Mrs. Trump gets is just, it's not fair.
Grisham says she was speaking out after reading an op-ed on CNN.com that claimed Melania doesn't understand what it means to be First Lady.
Just hours before that op-ed posted, she was at a hospital in D.C. visiting children and reading them a Christmas story. The day before that, she had gone to 2 military bases. So for me, the timing of the op-ed was particularly offensive.
Melania is also facing falling approval numbers. A new CNN poll found only 43% viewed her favorably, her lowest rating since becoming First Lady.
Welcome to the White House.
Welcome to the White House. By the way, did you notice how Melania and the kids were seated during that hospital photo op? For those who cannot see, there is this rather long bench, and Melania is sitting in the center, bundled up in a huge wool coat as if she is afraid the kids might get some of their poo on her. And we can see 2 little kids also in the picture. Presumably, they took the 2 cutest sick kids in the hospital and dressed them in cute outfits. And they sat in red with Melania, and each kid is sitting as far away from her as they can get and looking away into space as though they fear Melania will turn them to stone if they see her eyes. So, Stephanie Grisham is now the replacement for Sarah Huckabee Sanders as White House press secretary. Does she have a track record with the Hatch Act? There's been at least one substantiated complaint against her. The Office of Special Counsel found in 2018 that she did commit a violation when she tweeted the hashtag MAGA along with a photo from a 2015 Trump campaign rally. But Grisham is not the one currently on the hot seat with Congress. Rather, it is perennial Trump crony and crone Kellyanne Conway. You remember Kellyanne Conway, right? This is her at the inauguration with Hope Hicks, who, as it happens, also was called to testify before Congress on the matter of ethics violations in the Trump White House. So, what are we talking about here? Well, on June 13th, the Office of the Special Counsel sent a letter to Donald Trump indicating they had found his senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, in violation of the Hatch Act dozens of times. The letter called on the president to remove Ms. Conway from her federal position immediately. The watchdog group CREW, which stands for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, had filed Hatch Act complaints against Kellyanne Conway. I presume the OSC investigated it and then took it to a hearing for which Conway did not show up. After all, the board that tries the case is not the actual employer of the person being accused. The board can only say what they think should happen, and then it has to be enforced by whomever the offending individual works for. So in Conway's case, who cares? She can blow off the hearing knowing that if she loses, Trump won't do shit. The findings of the investigation are that Conway is a repeat offender with regard to the Hatch Act. She publicly bashes Democratic candidates, which the law says she is not allowed to do. There also was a previous OSC report from March of 2018 finding that Conway had violated the law on 2 occasions by advocating for and against candidates in the December 2017 Alabama special election for United States Senate. You remember that one. That was Roy Moore versus Doug Jones, and I will let you guess which candidate Kellyanne Conway advocated for and which one she advocated against. Hint, she advocated for a child molester. On June 13th, the House Committee on Oversight and Reform sent Conway a letter inviting her to testify regarding her failure to comply with federal laws, including ethics laws and the Hatch Act. That was the language in the letter. She was supposed to RSVP yes or no within 4 days, but she was fashionably late. It took 11 days until White House counsel sent a letter to Congress on June 24th, politely declining their invitation and claiming that Conway does not have to testify about anything on account of absolute immunity. On Wednesday, June 26th, the committee held a hearing to examine the recommendation of the OSC that President Trump remove Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway from federal service in the event that Conway failed to appear, and she had said she would fail to appear. The committee was going to hold a business meeting to consider a subpoena. Conway did fail to appear as she said she would, and the committee voted 25-16 in favor of subpoenaing her, and she, of course, is fighting that subpoena. The committee did hear on Wednesday from special counsel Henry Kerner. He testified that Conway's conduct created an unprecedented challenge to his ability to enforce the Hatch Act. It would appear that no previous White House staff has ever blatantly disregarded the law this much. First time for everything. Kerner said that Conway's violations of the law, combined with her unrepentant attitude, are unacceptable from any federal employee, let alone one in such a prominent position. By the way, Kerner is not known for being liberal or anti-Trump. He was chosen for his job by Trump, and his history before that was working for ultra-conservative politicians. As we have come to expect, the most dramatic moments of the hearing happened when Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had the floor.
Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, there's been a lot of comments made about the ambiguity of the Hatch Act, which I think is overall quite clear in its intent in saying we cannot use our official government capacities for partisan political purposes. That's a pretty clear line. And if there's any question about that, we ask. And in fact, I think that the proof of the clarity of the Hatch Act comes in what just happened earlier this year in the largest government shutdown in American history. Because we had 800,000 federal workers, from air traffic controllers to far beyond, to federal employees at the State Department here, 800,000 workers who are all subject to that same Hatch Act, and they knew what the rule was. They weren't getting paychecks. They used up their entire life savings. They were struggling to pay their mortgages. They couldn't feed their kids, and they still didn't say anything. They still didn't engage in political organizing against the people who were committing this against them because they understood the law. The violations here, to the extent and the repetitiveness to which they are being committed, is unique to Ms. Conway, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and with that, I would like to show you all a video that highlights many of the violations that the Office of Special Counsel detailed in its report.
Anything times 0 equals 0. Simple multiplication. So 50 Democrats can run, 19 are now running, but if your message is 0, it's a big 0. There's no strategy I see. You've got Bader O'Rourke and you've got Cory Booker promising that they would nominate a woman to be the VP. Do they not think the women running are good enough to be president? Stop the nonsense, everybody, about we are for all women. We are pro-women. We are for independent thinkers. You have Elizabeth Warren running for president. She tried to appropriate somebody else's ethnicity. She lied about that. They've got a bunch of, I like to say, I don't see any presidential timber yet, just presidential wood chips.
Yeah, Kelly.
And the women are complaining too. I see women on TV complaining about the female candidates aren't covered the same. That's just hogwash. They just have terrible ideas. But you can change the A to an O and get oh my instead of Amy there, because I don't think that was a very impressive rollout. Kirsten Gillibrand this weekend in her 50s, apparently was the first time she's ever eaten fried chicken, and she waited for the cameras to roll. I mean, this is just silly stuff. The only difference between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump is Bernie Sanders' ideas are terrible for America, and Donald Trump was a much better candidate, had connective tissue with the people. I think Biden's timing actually benefits him because the Democrats seem really desperate to find an alternative to Bernie Sanders.
Are you aware of any other senior aide to a president who has systematically violated the Hatch Act to this extent by attacking the potential opponents of the president?
I am not aware.
And I think this right here gets at the core of what we're talking about today, is that this is not even partisan, because members of Trump's own administration do not violate the law, this law, to the extent that she does. She is being subject to these reports because she is unique in her flagrant violation and disrespect for the law. And frankly, when she doesn't show up to her own congressional hearing today, she's not just disrespecting Democrats. I don't mind. That's something that she does on TV every day. She disrespects the entire body. She disrespects every Republican member of this body and disrespects the power that each and every single one of us has. And moreover, I think that this taps into a deeper narrative and a deeper pattern of what is happening out of this administration, where they believe that the rule of law only belongs and applies to some people and not others. Right here and now, we're about 20 years away from the Central Park Five, where the president put out a full-page ad demanding the death penalty for 5 black and brown boys, boys, they were not yet 18 years old, demanding the death penalty for something they were accused of and innocent of. And here we have just documented evidence of multiple times of violation of the same law, and he won't even issue a slap on the wrist. This is a pattern about some people being subject to the rule of law and others not. And when that happens, there is no rule of law at all.
I do want to make sure to give due credit to the other Democrats on the committee who also did a great job talking about what Kellyanne Conway did wrong and why it is a big deal. Granted, it's an easy issue. The law is simple. Conway violated the law many times and Donald Trump doesn't give a damn. Really, the only person on the committee who seemed to struggle with this was Republican James Comer from Kentucky. Here he is in the hearings.
All right, let's thank you, Mr. Kerner. So we go back to this is your interpretation of the Hatch Act. When she was on the Ingram Angle show, which I've been on a few times and many on this committee have been on, again, she was asked about Elizabeth Warren's claims of her Native American ethnicity. And she answered the question. Explain to me how that is a violation of the Hatch Act that would warrant her termination from a job that many of us think she does very well.
Sure, and just to explain too, when we talk termination, it sounds like we or somebody wants to deprive the president from having an effective spokesperson. That's really not what we're talking about. We're talking about having a federal employee abide by laws that apply to federal employees. So obviously there are solutions short of her disappearing. She can go to the campaign, she can speak in her private capacity. There are other ways for Ms. Conway to make all the points on behalf of the president that we in no way want to silence. So I just want to make that clear. And then as to your specific question, when she talks about Senator Warren and the alleged claims about her heritage and how it might have affected it, when she talks about that, it's not the veracity of it that matters. It's that they're not related to a policy. They're related to her as a candidate and why that would perhaps
I would, my opinion, my interpretation of what you just said, if you misrepresent your race in order to take advantage of affirmative action laws, that's a serious issue. I don't think that's a unique presidential partisan issue to point in general. I mean, if she was asked the question, she answered the question to the best of her knowledge factually, and in my opinion, what I read, that has the potential to be factual. But I think that we need to examine the Hatch Act moving forward. I'm glad that we've had some production here to where we can, in a bipartisan way, figure out the correct intent of the Hatch Act as we move forward to where we don't create a scenario where someone who's doing her job and her reputation is tarnished because of a misunderstanding of the Hatch Act. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Now, while Kellyanne Conway did not show up to the hearing to speak for herself, Representative Comer did raise for her, as you saw there, the old defense of, oh no, I didn't know that was against the law. I misunderstood the rules. AOC, on the other hand, concisely and passionately set forth why Donald Trump is the very last person who should be given a pass on breaking the law. The press has tried to get a response from Trump on this matter, but his office is not doing press briefings right now. He might tweet about it. Meh, the law isn't my type. Well, I'm going to stop talking now about Kellyanne Conway and start talking about Bridget Ann Kelly, because this is another good legal news story that came up during the last week, and the similarity of the names is like a built-in segue. Bridget Ann Kelly was an aide to Chris Christie when he was the governor of New Jersey. Kelly took the biggest fall, or arguably the biggest fall, maybe the second biggest, for the Bridgegate scandal. As you may recall, September 9th, 2013 started a period of several days during which 3 traffic lanes were closed during morning rush hour at a massively busy on-ramp to the George Washington Bridge in Fort Lee. The GW is the busiest motor vehicle bridge in the world, and this happened during one of the busiest traffic times of the year. It is also one of the only ways, this bridge that is, one of the only ways to commute into New York from New Jersey and to get between Manhattan and the Bronx. So the clusterfuck that resulted from these closures was epic, and it was completely unexpected because no one had been informed about it in advance, not even the police. It is difficult enough to get somewhere on time during commute hours in the New York area, which everywhere else are just called hours because, like, they don't stop commute time. It's always commute time around here. If a vehicle actually needs to get someplace quickly, like an ambulance, good luck. And that's just under normal circumstances. When those lanes closed, no one could go anywhere, and at least one person died. There was a 91-year-old woman named Florence Genova who had a heart attack, and they did not make it in time. And then there were all the commuters, people who live in Fort Lee typically only have to travel for about half an hour to get to work in Manhattan. Consequently, it costs a fortune to live in Fort Lee. But during the bridge crisis, that 30-minute commute turned into 4 hours. It was soon discovered that there was no legitimate reason for the lane closures. It actually was done as an act of political retaliation, and it is a kind of fuck you that only someone from Jersey could think up. But where the plan went wrong was that if you pull something like that on people from New Jersey, they don't just let it go and get on with their day. They will unrelentingly hunt down whomever is responsible, and they did. It turns out there was a conspiracy among high-ranking people in the state government, and that conspiracy sprung some leaks. Sources such as secret emails revealed that the closings were ordered by David Wildstein, who is a former political blogger in New Jersey, and he went to high school with Chris Christie. So during the time that Chris Christie was the governor, Wildstein worked as the director of interstate capital projects at the Port Authority, which is a joint agency run by the states of New York and New Jersey to handle all the bridges and tunnels and public transportation between New York and New Jersey. Wildstein's job, as the New York Times put it, was to keep a firm hand on New Jersey's interests. Bada bing. The U.S. Attorney's Office began investigating the bridge closures, and so did the New Jersey legislature. By the way, Chris Christie used to be the U.S. Attorney in charge of New Jersey. He was appointed by George W. Bush in 2001, and among other things, he prosecuted Jared Kushner's father and put him in prison. You would think Christie and his people would be, like, maybe smarter and, I don't know, perhaps more ethical? An email came to light, and it was written by Christie's Deputy Chief of Staff, Bridget Ann Kelly. The email was addressed to Christie's buddy Wildstein at the Port Authority, and it was dated 1 month prior to the bridge closings. It read, quote, "Time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee," end quote. Months of investigation revealed that this plan to close the lanes on the bridge was hatched by Bridget Ann Kelly, Christie's Deputy Chief of Staff, along with David Wildstein and Bill Baroni, who was another high-ranking official in the Port Authority. The alleged reason for this was to make life ugly for the mayor of Fort Lee, who had recently declined to endorse Chris Christie for re-election. No solid evidence was ever found that Chris Christie ordered the bridge closures, but people assume he did because it seems to be the most logical inference. Christie was not charged, and by the time this all hit the fan, he was in the middle of his second of 2 terms, and he really didn't care about anything. His closure of all the state offices and state facilities over 4th of July weekend in 2017 was covered in a prior episode of Habeas Humor. David Wildstein pled guilty to conspiring to misuse the property of an organization, receiving federal benefits, and conspiring to injure and oppress certain individual civil rights. He was sentenced to 3 years probation. Kelly and Baroni were convicted on 7 counts. Conspiring to misuse and actually misusing property of an organization receiving federal benefits, conspiring to commit and actually committing wire fraud, conspiring to injure and oppress certain individuals' civil rights, and acting under color of law to deprive certain individuals of their civil rights. In a plain language nutshell, the crime was ordering Port Authority equipment and directing Port Authority personnel to close off the traffic lanes on the bridge improperly and in a manner they were not authorized to do. Baroni was originally sentenced to 24 months in prison, and Kelly was sentenced to 18 months in prison. They both appealed their convictions to the Federal Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. In a unanimous opinion, the court threw out the 2 civil rights convictions but affirmed the other 5 counts. By the way, these legal proceedings cost the New Jersey taxpayers over $15 million. On appeal, Kelly and Baroni argued that they could not be guilty because they committed no acts of theft. All they did was allocate public resources based on political considerations, and there's no criminal law against that. Plus, state resources are finite, so governors have to make tough decisions all the time. If those decisions also happen to benefit the governor's friends and hurt the governor's enemies, well, that's just budgeting. The court said no. Kelly and Baroni altered the bridge's decades-old lane alignment without authorization and in direct contravention of Port Authority protocol for the sole purpose of creating gridlock in Fort Lee. To execute their scheme, they conscripted 14 Port Authority employees to do sham work in pursuit of no legitimate Port Authority aim. The fact that the defendants were politically motivated does not remove their intentional misconduct from the ambit of the federal criminal law. What they did is not analogous to a run-of-the-mill resource allocation where political considerations are allowed to influence discretion in the normal course of government operations. If it was, then there would be some kind of legitimate justification for doing what they did on the bridge. But there was, in fact, no legitimate justification. Kelly and Baroni disagree with the decision of the appeals court, so they petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to review the case, and the Supreme Court said yes. The case will probably be argued this fall, and the decision is likely to be out next spring. You might be wondering what happens to a criminal defendant if they appeal a case where they were sentenced to imprisonment. Do they stay out of prison until the end of the appeal process? Usually not, but it depends on whether this is a federal or state case, and it depends on whether we are talking a misdemeanor in municipal court or felony in superior court. It also may depend on connections, money, and power, as does everything in the justice system. I once was appointed by the state of New Jersey to do an appeal for someone who was convicted of a DUI in New Jersey municipal court. There was some jail time in the sentence, but the client was allowed to stay out of jail pending the appeal, which I won for him. Yay me! In the case of Bill Baroni, he started his prison sentence in April, so no waiting out the appeal for him. In the case of Bridget Ann Kelly, she petitioned the court to let her delay prison until July so that she could get her kids sorted for the rest of the summer and the next school year and stuff. And I believe she was successful in that, so she was out for a little while longer at least. We do not have time to really go into the legal battleground issues of the U.S. Supreme Court case or the probable reasons why the court decided to hear it, the expected outcomes. Hopefully we can return to that before the case reaches its final resolution. If you do have questions about all this, like if something I said does not make sense, I encourage you to write in or tweet me about it. Right now, it is time to thank the patrons.
It's time to thank our awesome patrons. Without you, this show wouldn't make me so cool.
This show is made possible by the pledges of generous and wonderful people who contribute $1 a show, and in some cases even more. Just like your favorite sommeliers, I work for tips. So if you have $1 or so to toss my way for each one of these shows, visit patreon.com/habehumor. The link is in the notes accompanying this episode. Please remember that if you pledge at $5 or more per episode, you will receive a free jarron. If I owe you one of these, please make sure that I have your current shipping address. It's a 2-ounce jar that you can use for shots or whatever you want. Some people say pot, but I wouldn't know anything about it. We have 3 new hobby humorists to welcome: Joshua Davis, Cindy Harris, and Ask and Tell Project at askandtell.com, LGB service members' stories. The hero humorists pledging $5 are Phil Stark, It's a Me, Keith Davies, and brand new hero humorist Brusque Platypus. Yay! Thank you all. On the Herculean humorist tier, the $10+ per show level, we have the amazing Locusts with Pitchforks and Glow Sticks, Brian Banofsky, and top patron Dan Griffith. Finally, we received a most generous PayPal contribution from Adam T. Thank you so very much, Adam. For everyone else, if you have not already done so, please go to Apple Podcasts/iTunes right now and rate Habeas Humor 5 stars. It's fast and free, and it helps the show get ranked higher, which means more listeners. We have not been able to crack the top 200 in our category for a while, although several of you did submit ratings and reviews, and thank you so very much. Each one helps, and we are steadily growing in the ratings. Have you subscribed to Habeas Humor on YouTube and thumbs up our videos? That actually can directly make money for the show if we get enough subscribers. So please do that. HabeasHumor.com is up and running, so it is your one-stop shop for watching, listening, supporting, communicating, and sending your friends. And it's time now for our favorite segment, audience participation.
Audience participation, playing along at home.
Last episode's audience participation question was, how would you prefer to notify Chase Bank that you decline to accept their mandatory arbitration agreement? My favorite answer is by the Sarah Talk podcast on Twitter at Sarah Talk Radio. She has tweeted that I may or may not have just ordered one of those giant novelty checks made to the order of Chase in the amount of "I reject your stupid arbitration clause, jerks." I love that, and I would precede the giant check with a colorful mailing to Chase that says, "You may already have won my middle finger in your face." And then I would show up with the giant check and give him the middle finger. For this week's audience participation, please draft an update to the penalty portion of the Hatch Act, as it is so very toothless and outdated, just like my grandmother. Kidding, she's dead. What should happen to people like Kellyanne Conway and Jared and Ivanka when they misuse their positions to wield political influence? To answer audience participation, share this episode on Twitter or Facebook with your answer written in and hashtag it HHAP. I will choose my favorite response and read it on the next episode. Please share the show liberally and tell all your friends. And as always, do not take any legal advice from this show or get any big ideas about an attorney-client relationship being formed, because this is for your entertainment only, and I may not know what I'm talking about. The attached notes contain links to the sources used in this episode, as well as how to find habeas humor all over the interwebs. Guess who is not limited in their political speech by the Hatch Act? Me. So support your favorite anyone but Trump candidate. Vote, 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 and stay legal, my friends.